Thank you so much. And with that,
Absolutely.
everybody should be getting a message on their screen to indicate that this meeting is being recorded. And
Thank you.
thank you for that reminder. And I will just do a quick recap of what I just said, only for the benefit of anybody watching this on the recording. Again, my name is Julie Dixon. And one of the things that we're going to talk about today are the project objectives, basically how parking is going to be managed in Monterey. We're going to talk a little bit about a parking overview, really kind of when we talk about parking theory and how it applies in Monterey, so that we can really focus on making data-driven decisions. And then we're going to do some live polling today where there'll be 4 questions and you'll have the ability to respond to those. And then also for those that have attended meetings in the past, we're going to do something called the parking magic wand exercise, where we'll ask that each of you have the opportunity, if you had a parking magic wand, what would you change, fix, or improve about parking in Monterey? And so we'll ask for some interactive participation on that. So start thinking about that one. And then as you'll see here on the bottom of the screen, we do currently have a survey live. And some of the questions that we're going to ask today, you're definitely please welcome to go onto that Survey Monkey and fill out that survey. Share it with your customers, share it with your neighbors, share it with your colleagues. The more feedback that we can get on that survey, the more relevant that the recommendations as we move forward will be, especially as it basically supports the city of Monterey. So with that, and our recording is in action, Kelly, if you would move me to the next slide, that would be great. So when we talk about the objectives for parking, there's a couple of things that we're doing in this project. And today's meeting is really to focus on some of what I'll call the discount parking programs, which include the residential parking pass program and the Monterey's locals parking program. We have a couple of slides that go into some details about each of those programs so that if you're not already familiar with those, we'll definitely go through those details. And the objective of this discussion is to really engage all of you, including, like I said, your neighbors, friends, colleagues, and peers, so that we can get the feedback so that when we talk about making the recommendations, we're doing things that are relevant for Monterey. We want to also look at this holistically. In some cases, we might not all agree per se, and like maybe different neighborhoods have different priorities. And so that's one of the things that we've got to look at things holistically and comprehensively so that we find the solution that best works for the city as a whole, especially when we talk about overcoming challenges and also looking for that immediate impact. One of the things I like to tell people is that parking is a customer service extension of the city. And I like to treat it as a positive experience that we want our customers and visitors and neighbors and residents to have. And so that's something that as we talk today about parking, I like to talk about it from that perspective, is that when we think about parking as a service, it's something that I think really kind of changes the conversation when we start to think about some of those details associated with parking management and talking about having a sustainable solution. And again, that survey will be repeated throughout so that everybody will have that for reference. Kelly, if you can go to the next slide. So now let's jump into, as we go to the next slide, a little bit of, I call it like parking 101, parking background. I think it's really important that, when we look at things holistically from a parking management perspective, we need to not only think about today. I mean, who would have ever expected that we would have all gone through a pandemic and, times are different than what they normally are. But the fact is, we also have to think about, what normal is going to be, what regular life might be in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, and up to 10 years plus, and how that aligns with the city's strategic plan. I think it's really important when we think about parking can't just be in its own silo. We have to think about how things interconnect. When we talk about things like transportation and transit, traffic, congestion mitigation, we have to think about how all of that connects. So when we talk about first mile, last mile trip planning, we want to be sure that that's an easy, fluid experience. So when we talk about that parking roadmap, the parking management roadmap, we really want to think about that end user. And the end user isn't just our customers. The end users are the business owners that need customers to have a place to park. They're the residents who live in our communities. They're the city staff members who have to support the infrastructure, support the technology, maintain it, collect it, manage it. And those are all things that when I think about the end user experience, I'm looking at it comprehensively from that perspective. Something else that's important, and I know that this won't necessarily go over well with everybody, is that parking is never free. Even when you're parking on a street that has no signs and has no time limits, no meters, the fact is that there's asphalt, there's pavement, there's street markings, there's street signs. So I like to help people understand that there's always a cost for parking, and it doesn't necessarily associate or affiliate with a parking meter or a parking permit. And when we start to talk about that basic conceptual understanding, and we start to talk about policy changes, adjustments, or adaptations, or implementing technology, we need to do things incrementally. And I say that because I like to describe parking as a learned behavior. It's something that all of us who have been driving for a while know what we do. We know how we do it. We know where we park. And we have a certain expectation for where we're going to go and how we're going to park. I know when I go to the mall, I always park in the same area because I always go through that one door so that I can find my car again. People have those same behaviors when they come downtown or come down to Cannery Row or go down to the wharf. And those are factors that if we want to change people's behavior, it comes down to education and information and the fact that we can't do it overnight. It has to happen incrementally. And we also can't forget the fact that we need to have a sustainable solution because any of these opportunities absolutely cost money. Next slide. So one of the things that I think is important, it's something what we've been working on collectively with city staff, is that we're really trying to get to the root of the issue rather than having Band-Aid solutions. I think it's important to understand that when we come up with Band-Aid solutions or temporary fixes, it oftentimes just pushes the problem from one side to another, for one community to another, from one street to another. So we really want to get to a place where the city can be proactive rather than reactive. And that's something we really want to be cognizant of as we're talking about parking management in Monterey. Next slide. And so that gets us down to that core root. And that's why when I talk about what I like to do is I like to rip off all the Band-Aids, find out where the bleeding is coming from so that we can get to the root cause and try to solve for what the need is. And oftentimes it doesn't necessarily need to be something overly complex to resolve it, but we can really get to the root of addressing the problem. And you've heard me mention this a couple times, but it's really important to emphasize this. Oftentimes parking challenges are related to perception, where I could say, there's never a parking space when I want to go to Cannery Row. And the fact is, there's just never a parking space where I want to park, maybe. There might be a parking space in the garage, or there might be a parking space around the corner, but it's not where I want to park. So my perception is that there's never parking, and I like to rant and rave about it. But the reality is that there's actually ample parking. It's just not necessarily where I want to park. And that's something that we have to really leverage data to demonstrate to people where parking is available, and knowing that you might have to just walk an extra block or two potentially to get to that location. And then knowing the resources when we talk about off-street facilities, including surface lots, and being able to brand those accordingly so people can understand where those resources are. And I do have to give a shout out to city staff because I think some of the new branding in the garage is really a win when it comes to identifiers and being able to identify your location, and some of that branding element that I think, again, improves the overall customer experience. And one thing that nobody likes to talk about, but I always have to bring it into the conversation, is enforcement. I like to talk about compliance because I like people to follow the rules. And so that's how I like to take the perspective. But the fact is, we have to have consistent compliance to make sure that people are following the rules. That's why we have the regulations. And the one thing that I think is important, especially as business owners, I like to treat a parking space as another parking manager in another city called it a wallet. Basically, by turning over those parking spaces, it brings more wallets into my businesses and my restaurants. And so that's something that I think is really important. It's the reason why we have to have our employees parking in designated locations and having that turnover and those churn and that transition in those spaces so that we can get more customers parking in those resources. Next slide. And so a couple of things I mentioned we wanted to share for today's discussion is talking about some of the discount programs that are currently in play now. One of which, and some of you may already be familiar with these details, but I'm just going to highlight some of those associated with it. One is the resident parking pass program, eligible for City of Monterey residents and active duty military with proof of military ID. With that, you get 2 hours of free parking per day in each of the city's parking facilities. That permit costs $20 per permit, and you can basically park in the downtown garages, Cannery Row garage, and the waterfront lot. So you can see with that $20 value, you basically can get up to 6 hours of parking per parking for free per day. The other permit program is the Monterey Locals Permit Program. This is eligible for Monterey County residents, where you get 2 hours of validation from wharf merchants with a valid ID. It's valid Monday through Thursday, And the Cannery Row Locals program provides free parking after 4 p.m. in the Cannery Row garage. And that program did expire in June of this year, and it is currently on pause as we're evaluating these program details. Next slide. So a couple of things that we want to put on the table for consideration. One thing is being able to automate the permit process. What's really neat in other cities, and in fact, other beach cities have done this very effectively, is providing the conveniences of being able to let customers, residents, and our community to be able to go online and provide your proof of credentials to be able to acquire your permits, so that for whatever rules are determined to be the case moving forward, to allow for that kind of a virtual permit system to let people go online and purchase that. And because I use the term virtual, I want to highlight the fact that the city has been implementing technology that allows us to leverage the license plate, which is very consistent with what most parking programs are doing. Coming in and out of COVID times right now, being as contactless as possible, the utilization of the park mobile payment application, ingress and egress in the garages and the surface lots. Any opportunity that we have that we can leverage the license plate is one that I will say is very consistent with the industry as a whole. Next slide. And so the other options too are to make some adjustments to the programs to focus on attracting more residents and customers to the business districts during non-peak periods. I wanted to let you all know I didn't go into a lot of granularity about some of the programs that I work on, but we have a kind of a niche that we work in a lot of tourist heavy communities: Park City, Utah, Seaside, Florida, Sausalito, California, all just a couple of the samples of communities that we've worked in. And one of the things that we have found in those programs is that where the real need is during the non-peak seasons. Now, I know for most tourist communities, non-peak is becoming a smaller and smaller window of time. And so this is something that could be evaluated, but considering being able to draw your community, your locals down during your non-peak times where it's most conducive and convenient for them, there's opportunities that other communities have leveraged so that they can offer non-peak discounts and different meal packages and all sorts of factors like that that can tie into discounted programs that could be based on a certain day of the week, times of the day, or different seasons of the year. A lot of our winter communities with snow, like Park City, for example, or Truckee, California, they have something called shoulder season. For those of you who haven't lived at the beach communities your whole lives, the shoulder season is when in the snow communities they do the road work, where they can basically do a lot of the heavy lifting. And that's also a good time where they take advantage of those non-peak periods to bring their locals and community members into the popular locations and shopping areas too. Next slide. And so another opportunity, another option is to implement a validation program that can be provided to any customer at the discretion of the business. This is a program that's worked very well in Paso Robles, California, just down the highway from all of you, where businesses have the opportunity to basically buy, I call it buying in bulk, where you can buy basically a bulk parking purchase at a discounted rate, and then you can issue those validations to your customer at your discretion. And that's something that's really important because it really incentivizes visitation for not only the current visit, but also for future off-peak visits, or again, whatever the business rules that are determined for the utilization of that. And it really establishes some of that customer allegiance. But I will also highlight one of the things that's important about a program like this too is because of the automation, it actually mitigates abuse, so that those employers that basically purchase validations and potentially use it on their employees' cars, which again, I don't know why you would do that, but some companies, some businesses do, those types of tools are identifiable. And so that could actually cause a merchant to lose their privileges based on investigation and based on follow-up. So we have found that this is the type of model that works the most effectively and efficiently because the businesses can participate at their discretion and basically participate at whatever level that they want to. And I think this is important too when we talk about having a sustainable solution. This is something that we know is advantageous to ensure that the program is paying for itself. And I think that that's something that's really important when we talk about the parking program. When we talk about having these conveniences, it's really about making sure that the system pays for itself. It's not about a revenue grab. It's not about generating revenue. It's about making sure that we can provide available parking for our customers to be able to come down and shop at our businesses. Next slide. And so with that, before we go into any Q&A, I thought what we would do is go ahead and moderate the Zoom poll. So if everybody will get their keyboards ready, I'm going to ask Kelly to go ahead and post the first question, which I'll go ahead and read for everybody, and then everybody can select their answers. So the first question is, are you a City of Monterey resident? And if you could pick one answer, yes, no, I live in Monterey County. No, I live elsewhere in the Monterey Bay Area. No, I live elsewhere in California. I'm just counting how many participants we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There should be maybe 2 more folks. If there, we'll give it another minute here to see if we're going to get any other answers. There we go. We're getting closer. So it looks like we've got a pretty even spread. We've got a couple of Monterey residents. We've got a couple that live in Monterey County. And we have one that lives elsewhere in the Bay Area, in the Monterey Bay Area. And we have one that lives elsewhere. So Kelly, if we can go ahead and move. Oh, I have to share the results.
Yeah, there we go. There we go.
My bad. Yeah, they can't see what I can see. My apologies for that. So what you now see are the results that I also just tried to dictate to all of you, that you can see that we have a couple folks that live in the city, a couple that live in Monterey County, and we have one that lives elsewhere in the Monterey Bay Area and one that lives elsewhere in California. Kelly, can we move on to the second question? Do you own a business or work within the city of Monterey? Yes, I own a business in Monterey. Yes, I work for a business in Monterey. Or no, I do not own a business or work within Monterey. And Kelly, how about when I call it, that'll mean you share the results.
Got it.
Just need to get 1 or 2 more folks to respond. Okay, Kelly, if you can post the results. So it looks like we have 1 representative as a business owner. We have 3 that work for businesses in Monterey, and we have 1 who does not own a business or work within Monterey. Kelly, can you post the next question? Which business district is your business or the business that you work for located in? And I will list them: Alvarado Street in downtown, Cannery Row, Del Monte Shopping Center, Lighthouse District at New Monterey, North Fremont, Old Fisherman's Wharf. Oh, and Wharf is spelled incorrectly. Apologies for that. Or other. We need 1 more response. Perfect. If we could post the poll, please, Kelly. So we have a couple of representatives from Alvarado Street in downtown. We have a representative from Cannery Row, and we have a representative from Old Fisherman's, and I will say Wharf only because that's what it says on the screen, but for the Wharf. So Kelly, can we go to the next question? There we go. How much time does your typical customer spend at your business? Less than an hour, 1 to 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours, more than 4 hours, or NA, I don't own a business or work in Monterey. Oh, looks like everybody was really quick on that one, Kelly. So if we can post the answers. This is actually a good one for us to talk about because we've got 1 person saying less than an hour. We've got a person saying 2 to 3 hours, but we have 2 people saying 3 to 4 hours. So that'll be really helpful. I kind of want to speculate on what those businesses are. I'm going to assume maybe a salon potentially, but it'll be good to hear the feedback on the 3 to 4 hours. And then we've got an NA on that. So if we can stop sharing on that one, Kelly. So those are some very helpful results. And if we dig in as we go to the next slide, the online poll goes into quite a few more questions, which you can see the online poll there. Again, we're pushing that one hard. So be sure to share that with your colleagues and peers. What I'd like to do next is, and in fact, before we go to the parking magic wand, I think I'd actually just like to see, based on everything that we've shared so far, I wanted to see if anybody had any immediate questions or anything that you wanted to be sure that we discussed before we go into the interactive conversation about the magic wand. And if you would, either raise your hand or put a note in the chat and we will unmute you. But if there's anybody that had anything that was anything I've mentioned so far today that they wanted to ask any questions about, give a moment here to see if any hands go up or if anything comes up in the chat. Okay, I'm not seeing any. There's still ample time, just so you know, we do have 2 hours scheduled for today. So I just want everybody to know we're here to talk about this and make sure that we cover all of our bases. What I'd love to be able to do is go person by person and ask you if you had a parking magic wand, what would you change, fix, or improve about parking? And I'd love it if we could try to really focus it on the parking pass discount programs and see what you all would think about that. But I'm also open to feedback of any form or any kind. And only because I see that the name under it is 18315, so I don't know your name. Would you mind also, when you all come online, is to just share your name, how you're affiliated with Monterey, and then tell us how you would use that parking magic wand. So it looks like you're unmuted. Why don't you go ahead and go next?
Okay, I'm Wendy Brickman. I'm the president of Old Fisherman's Wharf. I also work with North Fremont. I'm also a resident with a home-based business. And the magic wand I would want is free parking, which obviously isn't possible at the Wharf waterfront lot. I'm the one who receives every single email of complaint and confusion with the new automated system. I know Christy has worked so hard, and Steve and you, to make it as painless as possible, but it's been very, very painful. And there's so much confusion, I can't tell you. So on the other hand, we've spent thousands of dollars and pushing the Monterey County Locals Program, which is the one I'm talking about, I guess, first. And, you know, it's been out for 10 years or however many that we're always promoting on, you know, so many things that we do, that we have the 2 hours free parking. With a pandemic, you know, I'm seeing irregularities, but I don't get to see the numbers. So magic wand is I get to see the numbers so I can better communicate with my merchants. The validation system has been a learning curve for them, and it's a little clunky. It would be better if they can just print out what they need. And I just wouldn't want this pandemic. There were 200 cases yesterday, 85 cases today. I'm just deeply concerned when on the North Fremont side, I have a lot of hotels who say during the week it's lousy. We're not getting any international visitors. I'm seeing conferences canceled. So I think this would be a lousy time to change anything on either program, because it's so easy to lose customers to Carmel, Pacific Grove. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but you know, this is just another competitive advantage that we offer and have offered. As a city resident, I think $20 is cheap for a year. I would be willing to pay more. I also work for the Golden State Theater, which brings me into the Alvarado downtown area. And I just wrote to Christy, you know, they're doing an aggressive, at least this till December, and then the new owners will probably take over. A lot of, you know, like the Beach Boys will almost sell out. That's almost 1,000 people leaving at the same time. I mean, I think the way you did it before, that you pay when you come in flat and then you lift the gate, is heck of a lot more efficient. I guess that's enough.
No, but Wendy, you brought up a couple of things, if it's okay. Like I mentioned, this is interactive. So I wanted to ask one thing about getting to see the numbers. Can you help me understand, what is it that you want to see? What is it that you're hoping to see? Is it just parking occupancy numbers, or can you help me understand what you're seeking?
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know what else I can, but parking occupancy numbers, maybe how many license plate recognition, because I love that aspect of the automated parking. And then the other thing that's come up in a recent meeting is when you have that parking mobile system in place, I think, you know, if it's pouring rain, somebody has to get out and pay for parking. I should also speak for the Magic Show, which is a new aggressive, increasingly attended show right at the wharf entrance. So when their 100 seats, if they fill to capacity, gets out, that puts on even more of a burden of people paying to get out.
get out. And so now you brought up something I think is really great to share. So one of the things I wanted you to know, Christy and staff have been working diligently with Park Mobile, the mobile payment vendor, and with the TIBA, the vendor, to get that integration component worked out so that people will be able to use their mobile devices. There's some development things happening between the two vendors that were not quite over the finish line yet, but I wanted you to know that that is in queue. We don't have a specific date, unfortunately. I hate not being able to give you a date, but I want everyone to know that that is something that has been in queue, and we are pressing hard to get that piece worked out, because I couldn't agree with you more. The opportunity to leverage that is going to be really important. I also wanted to go back, Wendy, to something that you said about the LPR, going back to the getting the numbers. So one of the things I think is important, and I think this will hopefully help people understand too, is that when we talk about the license plate recognition, I want to make sure that people also understand that basically your license plate becomes your parking permit. And what's really important about that is there's no lookup associated with the plate. So I was already kind of thinking down that pathway of, like, maybe the hope of getting people's zip codes, where are they coming from, all that kind of stuff. And I wanted people to understand that is not a function or a feature of the LPR technology, because all that's basically happening is it's an optical character recognition solution, period, where it's recognizing the numbers and letters on a license plate. And that's strictly the trigger. That's the identifier for that car, rather than having your ticket now be your recognition. It's your license plate, but there's no lookup, there's no DMV checks, there's none of that. So I just wanted folks to understand that there's no, I'll call it data that comes out that I would say like would benefit, like, if I was doing marketing or development, like I can't get any marketing data out of that information, other than I can tell you how many times a plate potentially has gone in and out of a garage, if it's registered, for a parking monthly pass, things like that. But even that gets into the weeds of places that most programs don't really go. But I just wanted to make sure that folks understood that about the LPR, is that it really is strictly a permit identifier. And so that opportunity to leverage that. But I like where you're, go ahead.
I forgot one more big section that Christy, bless her, knows. We've had some situations as a result of the automated parking that backs up. There was one 86-year-old, you probably heard about the 86-year-old lady who waited 45 minutes, and people are getting charged. They're waiting so long to get out. Now, I know that Steve and Christy are working very hard on the new 3 entrance or 3 exit. I'm not sure. I just hope that's going to deal with it, because even with smart signals on Figueroa, it's never been like that before.
Right.
We never had that. So Magic One is what Christy's been so sweet to do, is to, monitor this and to provide a human being on weekends, which is when we fill up. We're not getting a discount then. There's no, discount, right. But there's, and it's an older population. And even though you could say everyone should know this automated stuff,
no,
which way to put in the credit card,
sure,
or one credit card machine isn't working. So that's the other thing. I mean, I'm hoping that when they finish the renovation, it's going to free up.
Yeah, I think the learning curve, I want to say, is not unique to Monterey at all. So I want to highlight that. I think that's important. But I will also say this, and I'll say this on behalf of Christy and team. There have definitely been some bumps in the road, and I like to be transparent with people. I think it's important to be honest. And I will say that I know that staff have really stepped up to try to fill that gap. And I can assure you of the fact that the city is, really holding the vendor, under a really tight leash to get things back on track. And that's where, fortunately or unfortunately, kind of which side of the coin you're looking on, the city staff has really had to step up to fill that gap. Because I think that that's the one thing that I really appreciate about Monterey, is that the city and the staff recognize the importance of customer service as it relates to that. And I will say the whole pay on entrance versus pay on exit for special events, that's not a non-issue at this point. I will say that COVID has obviously thrown some curveballs into the works, but I think that there's always been a special event management plan. It's just that with the way that just parking operations as a whole have been impacted throughout the whole country, I think that you'll see some of that evolution really kind of coming to fruition, because that was always part of the game plan. And I think that you'll see continued improvement as it relates to some of that technology. The one last thing before we go on to the next person, you talked about the current validation system being a little clunky, and
Yes.
I can appreciate that. And one of the things and why I know that this Park Mobile piece is going to be so critical, and I can already see Christy smiling and nodding her head, is that utilizing Park Mobile to do the validation moving forward is something that is so seamless that your merchants can actually have a Park Mobile account that they can actually issue codes from to their customers. So when you want to talk about easy peasy, it's literally texting a code to a customer versus having to do papers or flyers or stamps or tickets. And it really will be a game changer. And I'm not going to say it's going to happen on day one, but it's something that if we head in that direction, the opportunity for a really seamless customer experience is one that I think will really be advantageous, especially for all of the different districts and folks that are involved as well.
And that sounds exciting to me as well. Are you saying it would be one code per merchant, or would they have to do different codes all the time?
Great question. I'll say that it's probably getting into the weeds, but I'll say that there's all sorts of different opportunities when it comes to that type of a structure. What it basically is, it's designed so that if I give Kelly a code, she can't necessarily use it every time she comes down. So there's usually a system where it's like a randomizer is like a really typical program, but this is something that would have to be defined and developed for Monterey and specific for what the Monterey needs are. But the typical programs are one that if Kelly comes into my coffee shop and I'm going to validate for parking, I can actually give her a code, and it's a one-time use code that she can use it now or she can use it later. Those are all rules that can be determined through the city and through their merchants to figure out a program that's really going to be optimized for everybody and for their best needs that suit their business.
And just last, that sounds exciting, except speaking for my gift stores, people who, other than restaurants and maybe whale watching, the gift stores that, you're used to going really fast. That's why I was
Sure.
saying if it was a standard, but you're saying it won't be a standard code. Could it print out on a receipt?
On a receipt? Yep. You know how like when you go to the car to the gas station now and you can get a code on to go get a car wash? It can be something as simple as that too. And those are things, like I said, getting into the weeds, but those are the kind of details that I think are going to be really exciting when you talk about the ease of convenience. And that's the part that, we haven't really gone down that pathway because we have to get the technology to work and turn it on so that way then we can start to roll out all these bells and whistles and, all these game changers.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to put you back on mute, and I'm going to go ahead and move around the circle. And how about if we go to Rick Johnson? Rick, I'm going to ask to unmute you. Hopefully you're getting a message that says, there you go. Rick, can you hear us okay?
Sure can.
Great.
I won't have nearly as many questions as Wendy did, but I certainly echo all of hers. So good going, Wendy. Thank you. One concern we have, I'm director of the Business Association downtown. A huge one we have is employees in the area. And there's a couple ways we look at it. One are employees doing the employee dance after every couple hours to move their cars, and making it more inviting for them to get into the garages is important. Also, whatever we can do at discounting for employees, right now, we are having so much trouble finding employees during the pandemic. And anything we can do that would encourage more so that they're not spending as much money, or for that matter, that the business isn't spending that much money on employees trying to get them back downtown. So those would be my concerns. I will tell you something that surprised me. When the price went up in the garage, I thought we would get a lot of complaints, and we didn't. I guess it works that I'm telling everybody to complain to Wendy. So that seems to be working really well. I'm going to continue with that. But that wasn't the problem. But I really am hoping, even in the short term, I know you want to look at long-term solutions, but in the short term, what we can do for employees would be very helpful.
Yeah, Rick, that's really great feedback. And one of the things too regarding the price increase I want to highlight as well is when we look at it from a comparable city standpoint, I will say that Monterey is neither at the high or the low end. The fact they're right there in the median aspect of it too. So I think that that increase was very much, I'll say, palatable for most. But the employee parking, couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, one of the things that in terms of identifying, the one thing that you all have that other communities don't, and again, I'm going to say in normal operating hours, the fact that you all have that trolley system is something that I really want to emphasize, is the opportunity to circulate people to, I'll call it underserved locations. And so the opportunity to tie that in with discounted employee parking permit programs, I think is something that is really advantageous. One of the things, we work in several communities where we've actually deployed what we call a low income employee parking permit, where through proof of wages, you can basically apply for a discounted permit. And what's really neat is those automated systems, you can submit the paperwork online, make it really easy peasy. So I think that that's something, I appreciate your feedback, because yours is not the only voice. We're hearing this kind of loud and clear across the country. And especially given the need to hire people, it's really become especially prevalent now. So I'll definitely take note of that and really appreciate your feedback. And I think we should just direct all questions or comments to Wendy moving forward. It sounds like that works for you. So, well, thank you, sir, for joining us
You bet.
today. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank
And then
you.
we'll go ahead and move on. And I'm going to come over to Bethany. And Bethany, I'm going to ask to unmute you if you get the unmute request. Let's see. Bethany, can you hear me okay? Let's see if it turns on. There we go. Oh, maybe not. I'm going to try one more time there. So Bethany, if you're there, you should be getting an invitation to unmute yourself.
Julie, she's actually city staff. I don't think she
Oh.
has a microphone.
Well, then never mind. I only thought Steve was our city staff on the board. Are there any other, before I start putting other people on the spot, are there any other city staff members that I should know of?
We have Marissa, Bethany, and Steve on the call.
Perfect. Okay. Well, then I'm going to go over to Betsy Wilson with a smiling picture and green scarf. Betsy, you should be getting a record. There we go. Betsy, can you hear me
I
okay?
just unmuted myself. Yeah. Hi.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hi.
So tell us how you're affiliated with Monterey, and then what you would use that magic wand for.
Sure. So I lived in Monterey for a little over 11 years, and I work for a nonprofit that builds affordable housing. And we've built one community here in the city, and then we're working with the city on 3 other potential communities in downtown. You know, I just have one anecdote, which, you know, may just be laughable, but I always park in the surface lots downtown, because one time I drove into I think it's the Tyler Street garage, and just driving in there, I couldn't understand the instructions. I only wanted to stay for an hour. It looked like it was going to cost me $20. So I just backed out, and I've never been in any of those garages since, because it was like, I don't understand this. Like, I'm just going to park on the street where I can, you know, pay at the little station or use my quarters. And I had no idea there were these programs for residents. So that's awesome. And I'm definitely going to use them, but I've lived here 11 years. And I mean, I feel like I'm fairly informed. I get the city newsletter, I read the Herald, but I had no idea that those were available. So
That's actually really helpful to know, because I think it's, especially given how long you've lived there, it's surprising to know that that's the case. And I do think that one of the opportunities moving forward with whatever the decision that is made is that the opportunity to educate and inform, the outreach messaging, I think is really significant. And especially if we leverage the Park Mobile account to be able to potentially tie in whatever parking pass or program we have. The fact that we have such a significant user base that's already using the program, we can use that as a messaging tool as well. So I think that that'll be really significant. But also, Betsy, given, you know, some of your constituency, I think it's really important to recognize too that one of the things that we have to always keep in mind with Monterey being a municipality, I always say that parking has to be easy, convenient, and accessible. And for me, accessible also means equitable. So we have to keep in mind, I have a lot of folks say, why can't everything just be mobile based? Why do we have to have kiosks at all? Why can't we just use our phones? And I like people to understand the fact that not everybody is connected. There is still a percentage of our population that don't have credit cards, nor do they have cell phones. I know it's shocking to most, but the fact is we need to keep in mind the fact that these are municipal entities and we've got to make sure that everybody has equal access to those too. So, so awesome, Betsy. Anything else you think you'd use that magic wand for? Anything else you wanted to share with us?
No, I think that's it.
Great. Thanks for coming today. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
We'll move down the list here and let's see. I think Bonnie, would you mind to go next for us? If you can unmute yourself, Bonnie. Is there anything you want to tell me about Bonnie, Christy?
I'm not sure who that is.
Okay, no worries. So Bonnie, since we aren't seeming to be able to unmute you, Barbara, how about if I come over to you? And Barbara, if you can unmute yourself. Barbara, is it Meister? There we go. Barbara, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I sure can.
Great. So how are you affiliated with Monterey, and what would you use that parking magic wand for?
I'm the Public Affairs Director for the Monterey Bay Aquarium. So we are a generator of traffic, can be, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 visitors a day during the summer and the holiday season as well, and spring break. We also, by way of our use permit, am required to fund about 20% of the MST trolley during the summer to alleviate traffic congestion. And so the magic wand, and then we also, well, prior to COVID anyway, had a pretty aggressive alternative transportation program for employees and volunteers. But that's all been disrupted with layoffs and remote working. So not quite sure what that future looks like yet. But the magic wand would be consistency, I think, across the city. A logic to a parking, I'm just going to give you some principles more than specifics, but a logic to the parking strategy. It doesn't seem like there is much of a logic right now. And our employees get very frustrated when they are cycling around trying to find parking and not understanding the parking logic. And then my colleagues in Cannery Row get frustrated that they seem to bear the highest brunt of parking charges, where and are sort of in competition with the wharf, and the city owns those parking lots compared to the parking lots in Cannery Row, minus the garage, of course. But there's some real inconsistencies. Doesn't really seem to make much sense. The recent perception of my Cannery Row colleagues was that the city is competing with us by way of offering a lower price point on their lots on the wharf side of things. So it's not a healthy kind of agreement or understanding about what a parking program is for the city. And then there's also that concern about giving residents an opportunity to come and enjoy Cannery Road during the off season by way of some kind of resident incentive, lower price point, or what have you. So those are just a couple of my reactions for now.
No, I appreciate that. I don't know if you were on at the beginning for the presentation, but I appreciate your comments too about just the cohesiveness, the logic, and the consistency. And I think that that's really part of this exercise, so that, even for residents that have lived there for 11 years, will understand what program features are available to them. One of the things that I think are as important, I'm going to probably put Christy on the spot here for a moment, is when we talk about that rate structure. I know that we had a challenge with Coastal Commission as well when it came to the rates. And I didn't know, Christy, if there was anything that you could share as it relates to Barbara's comments when she talked about kind of the rates and the value of those rates and why they are the way they are. Did you have any feedback, Christy, that you could share for everybody's benefit?
As far as when the rates were raised, or?
Well, she was saying that I think she was commenting that they were lower, like in competition with the other entities. And I just was wondering if you could speak to the rate structures and kind of the restrictions or limitations that you have when it comes to rate changes.
Okay, thank you. I digested something different from that. But yeah, well, our rate structure is lower and it is limited by, I mean, we did do our comparable cities one. So I think, are you talking about how it compares with the private lots in that area?
Yeah, that's
Because
what.
there's
that's
like a
what-
couple different operators down there, and so they do set their own rates. I mean, we try to make our parking affordable and accessible, just as a public parking. So they do set their prices higher. And then some of our rates we did increase last year, but then we did roll them back due to the Coastal Commission. So I don't know if that fully answers what the
I think
question is.
that helps lead me. And I think what I was just trying to get to the point for Barbara and others to understand was the fact that Christy really hit the nail on the head when it comes to the municipal market. And it kind of goes back to that issue of equitability and why Coastal Commission does have a say so in what the rate structures can be. I think one of the things when we talk about parking mitigation and parking management, especially in popular congested areas, we want to make it easy and convenient for people to park as quickly as possible. And so I think that one of the things that, we can't and I say we being the city, we as a city can't dictate what private operators can charge at their particular locations. But to Christy's point, the opportunity to make it fair and accessible. And I think that some of the comments that Rick brought up earlier about being able to identify the need for employee parking so that employees have affordable places that they can park as well. That can include volunteers, et cetera. Those are things that we want to basically tie into this. So when we talk about that kind of cohesion and the way things should all basically communicate together. But sorry to put you on the spot, Christy, I was just trying to help Barbara also understand that the rate structures aren't necessarily in your purview. And the fact that the city actually did try to do some things and Coastal Commission actually kind of pushed back. And that's where we are, why we are where we are today. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody had that kind of understanding. But I think that the objectives that you tied in, Barbara, are definitely part of this project effort and ways that we can make it so that, again, we have a sustainable solution that also can bring community members down and to be able to enjoy the amenities that are available, not just for our tourists and for our visitors, but also to be enjoyed by our neighbors and our residents too. So I appreciate you coming today. Any other comments or thoughts that you wanted to share?
Oh, that's really it. I'm just, looking forward to this being a strategic process here so that we really develop a smart program. It's
Definitely.
time.
I
And
appreciate it.
our visitors, we are reliant on the city and those private operators. We do not have visitor parking. So we are
Right.
reliant on the city and the private entities to service our guests.
And if I could ask Barbara, just for my own probably nosy nature, how are you guys at capacity now? Are you operating back at 100% capacity or is it still limited capacity right now?
It's pretty much, our ticket sales are about 75% of capacity. So we're almost to fullness.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. It helps also kind of gauge the temperature of like what the populace is and, how many folks are kind of coming, to town and such. I know that what Wendy was sharing earlier about the hoteliers and things like that. I know that that's being felt, across the coastline too. So, well, thank you for that. We are
And one more thing, Julie, one thing that's really different right now is because of the pandemic and the need to socially or physically distance, we had to create time ticketing. So the crowds were paced out throughout the day. So that created a little bit of a different traffic pattern, different garage usage than normal years.
Right.
The question then becomes, are we going to continue time ticketing? We don't know yet, but I can tell you our customers kind of hate it. So that's been a big adjustment they don't really particularly like. So the jury's still out, but that's some data we're getting back.
No, that's really helpful. We do follow the time ticketing for venues like Disneyland, the San Diego Zoo, and others to kind of gauge, how things are going to be working moving forward. So we always kind of jokingly say, but when Disneyland stops the reservation system, then I think we all know that we're probably getting closer to normal times as well. So, so fingers crossed on that. But thank you so much for attending today. I'm going to go ahead and mute you back, and then I'm going to see if Nancy, I'm going to say Sule. Nancy, I'm going to ask if you can unmute yourself if you're there. Great. Hi, Nancy. How are you today?
Hi, just fine. I'm actually a resident, not a business owner. So
Oh,
I was
that's just
going to be
fine.
coming to tomorrow's and I wanted to hear what the issues were on because I'm in Old Town, Lower Old Town. So we're your neighborhood that utilizes a lot of that. So
Well, actually, so we were telling folks earlier that like we anticipated some overlap, but I mean, first of all, thank you. You don't have to attend both meetings. We're happy to have you at them. But would you mind, Nancy, for everybody's benefit, to share, especially from a resident's perspective, if you had that parking magic wand, what would be your priority, especially as it relates to the discount passes and programs?
well, we use the parking permit program and I use it at the sports center, even though I walk most of the time, but in the winter time or when I had surgery and I needed just the break of not walking, we've used it. So I think that's an excellent thing to continue for Monterey residents. We use when we go to the Cannery Row, if it's late at night or sometimes if it's really late, and we're going to the wharf to eat, we'll use your parking, the pass, because we have the pass for that. And I think both of those are really good for business as well as for the residents to be able to safely, return home, especially as it gets into the winter month. The darkness comes earlier, and as we all know, the sidewalks have a lot of differential lifting, so you don't necessarily want to do it in the dark. I can't hear you.
Yeah, that was because I was trying to make sure background noise was minimized. My apologies. No, I really do appreciate that for sure. And one of the comments that came up earlier, I don't know if you were online yet, was that $20 maybe it's a really good deal. And
Yeah.
I was wondering if you have any thoughts or reactions to what would be a reasonable price if the price did increase for the benefits that you receive that you described.
Maybe 25.
Okay. For the annual pass with the rules as they stand today.
Sure. Now here's another thing. We live on Larkin. We have a tenant behind us. We have a 2-car garage, but there's 2 spaces in front of our house. Our tenant hardly ever gets them because there's so much need for parking on the street, even though we've got a 1-hour limit.
Right.
And so she does have one of those permits that the city gives her to park on Larkin in the 1 hour and to be you're not going to ticket her for doing it, which is great. But even around the area, it's difficult. I mean, I almost see how we won't be able to ever have a party again, because where would anybody park? Would we,
Right.
It's kind of sad. A couple things I could suggest that might help when we have football games that will impact the area, especially Larkin is the feeder street right into Monterey High School. If the city could provide a shuttle to the parking garage, people would not be taking the streets, because even though I know PK Diffenbaugh said, oh, they can park in the garage, but they won't. They'll go and they'll park in whatever space they can get. And when I used to work in Carmel, I'm retired now, but when I worked, just coming home at night, and I could see that all the spaces were being used up just by the people returning home. And I'm afraid for the tenants, where will she park? She often doesn't get to park on Larkin because there's nothing for her, even though she's considered a resident of Larkin.
Right. No, thank you for sharing. And the feedback for the school is really helpful too. We'll definitely take note of that as well, because that might be something we can talk to the school about, being able to leverage that if we haven't already delved into that. So Nancy, thanks. And then I guess we'll see you again tomorrow. Again, no requirement to attend multiple meetings, no extra
That's
points
okay.
or anything, but we're happy to have you there as well. Okay.
And one other thing on the idea of that shuttle for the games, it would encourage people, I would hope, once they're parked in the parking garage, to use the restaurants on the way to the game. So there's a business aspect that could be helped by it. And if you wanted to try to validate, well, who's really going to the game, ask them to show the ticket stub.
Yeah.
The ticket stub to the game would be their ticket to their parking.
Yeah, no, great idea. I love it. Well, thank you for that, Nancy. And I guess we'll see you tomorrow. Okay. I'll put you on mute again. And then I see the name is A Costa. I'm going to ask if we can unmute you.
Actually, Julie, that one, she joined in late and it's a city employee.
Okay, and so I guess the only other person that I'm seeing is Bonnie, and I'm going to try one more time to see Bonnie if you wanted to unmute yourself. And I'll give it one last call here. I'm not seeing Bonnie being able to come. Kelly, were you able to send that chat and ask?
Yeah, I have not heard back from her yet, though.
Okay, well then I'm gonna just assume that maybe Bonnie doesn't have a mic or something like that. Just we'll put that out there. And Kelly, if you can go ahead and put the screen up for a second again, just so that we make sure everybody has reference to the survey. So as Nancy mentioned, we do have a meeting tomorrow where we will be speaking with community members, primarily residential side of things. But again, you know, we're willing and open to hearing from everyone and anyone, but there's no requirement to attend more than one meeting. I just wanted everybody to know that we will definitely take all of this information and put it into the responses and the results. And I wanted to be sure everybody had that reference for the online survey. And Kelly, if you could go to the next slide for me as well. And we also have the online survey posted in the chat. I wanted to make sure that everybody had our contact information. It sounds like most of you already have Christy's contact information. We've included our email address on there as well, so that if anything comes up, you maybe leave the call today and go, oh, I wish I told them that. Please don't hesitate to drop a note. We're definitely listening. We want to hear as much information as possible so that we can tie this in to the project. And that's really everything we had today, but I wanted to see if anybody had anything else pressing. It looks like Wendy, maybe you unmuted. Was there something else you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, that survey, I think I took it a few weeks ago. Do you want us to keep pushing it to our members? I mean, how
Please.
many responses have you gotten?
Kelly, would you mind to give us an update? Where are we right now with responses? Do you have that number?
Yeah, we're nearing 350 right now.
That's actually a really good turnout for a survey. And Kelly, where can you remind me, how long are we posting the survey through?
We'll have it open through the end of next week. I believe that's September 24th is the last day.
Great. So yeah, I'd say push it as much as possible. Yeah. Again, we don't need people to take it repeatedly. There's no stuffing the ballot box per se, but definitely the more feedback, the more candor, again, the more comprehensive and cohesive we can make sure that these recommendations come out to. So I think, again, tying in with what some of the feedback like Barbara offered as well, that's really the more gathering of intelligence that we can have, the better the solution will come together for Monterey. I wanted to look around the horn and see if anybody else had any other comments, any other questions, anything that we talked about. Yes, ma'am.
You talked about special events, and I know that the wharf merchants cringe when we have to close half our parking lot. So I don't know if you're talking about those kind of special events or more like the Golden State Theater selling out with the Beach Boys kind of event. What are you talking about?
You know, it's a great question. For the conversation that we were just having, I was referring more to like the concert type sellout type events. But okay. What's really part of this also more longer term strategic. We have some immediate needs that we have to obviously solve for. But what you're describing though is definitely what I call a special event parking mitigation plan. And it's interesting that you bring that up because right now in Paso Robles, their program is at a place where they use their, the town square where we have their central park area. And right now for those types of special events, when they have events there, they sometimes close city streets and things like that. So it's kind of the same aspect because they don't have the same kind of parking lots that you guys do. So we're currently working on the special event mitigation plan as it relates to that. So that is on the strategy. It's just a little bit further down the strategy line only because there's obviously some more imminent things that need to be resolved. But I will say that that's on the pipeline of issues that have to be addressed so that we can start to mitigate and manage for that and have what I also like to call a notification process associated with when those lot closures are going to happen. I think that's a really part of communication is making sure that we're messaging out to the appropriate resources to let them know when resources are going to be impacted as well. It's a great point.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anybody have anything else? I think there was a comment put up. Forgive me, let me just open it here really quick. So Nancy asked, do you have a way to determine if the household responses reflect how many other households are on the same lot utilizing the same two spaces? Kelly, I'm going to defer to you. I don't believe that the survey goes into that level of delineation, but would you mind to speak to that?
Yeah, it doesn't, I guess the survey is asking about the specific household that you live in and how many spaces you have access to. So if those are shared spaces, that's just a factor you'd have to take into account with like the tenant that you said that you have. So that person, I guess, would say that they wouldn't have access to a space.
And Kelly, sorry, Kelly, back to Nancy. I will be sure that I'll think about that one some more too, so that when we're on tomorrow's call with the neighborhoods, we'll be sure to talk about that a little bit more, and maybe we can dig a little bit deeper into that. And we're going to be doing some online polling there. So maybe Kelly, we can enhance the questions to be able to specifically address that comment. I think that would be a good way to address that as well. So. Great. Christy, was there anything else that you wanted to add or anything else that you wanted to say in summation of today's meeting?
Sure. I just wanted to follow up on a couple of things that I could offer, just as some feedback to some of the comments. For the Park Mobile app, I do have an update that I worked with TIBA today and reached out to Park Mobile. So we are looking at October as when we think that integration will be available. So that is something exciting to look forward to and just around the corner. So that has its wheels in motion. And then for Wendy, I also wanted to mention that we did install brand new decals on all the pay stations for the right way to insert the credit card. The one that was on there, I know it was a, the 2D graphic was making it difficult for people to interpret. So we did update that. If you haven't checked it out, next time stop by, we put them on all of the pay stations. So hopefully that helps. And then for Rick, I wanted to let you know, I didn't know if you already knew, but we do have part-time employee vouchers that are valid in our downtown garages. So it's 20 passes that are $50. So the difference with that versus our monthly permit is that they don't have a set expiration time. So they're perfect for the part-time employee who's just working a few days a week. So that definitely is a program we have for downtown employees. That also is available in the Cannery Row Garage. And then the last one I have, I believe it was Betsy, who just learned about our great resident parking program. So I just wanted to let her know that that was also accessible on the website at monterey.org/parking. There is an online form that you can do that if you're interested in applying for the permit.
Great wrap up, Christy. That was great information. And again, no requirement to attend tomorrow night's meeting. You are all welcome to it, but it will again focus on the residential side of things. We will definitely continue to stay engaged. We really appreciate you all taking time out of your schedules to talk to us about parking today. We know that it impacts everybody, and it's something that I think that the city really does take that service very seriously. And I think that very serious, and that's something that I think you'll see some of the opportunities just with even some of the information that Christy just shared. So with that, tell people to fill out the survey. You've got our contact information. And again, nice to see all of you. Thank you for participating today, and more details to come soon. So everybody have a good rest of your day. Thank you. And thanks for tolerating the background noise. I appreciate you all, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.